thinking cap on, and the summer school was to be funded by the HEA, which is the Higher Education Authority, a very, very noble authority here in Ireland. And I had a student here in our PR and media course, and she was a TikToker called Lauren Whelan, and she had over 1 million followers on TikTok. I was very interested in what she was doing. It was kind of a side hustle for her, and I created a summer school called the Digital Hustle. So I only wanted 30 participants, Matt. And even then, I was trying to scope around for my 30 participants. I did a little bit of media, and we had one article in the Sunday Independent, the largest selling newspaper in Ireland. And within about 20 minutes, I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of applicants. We actually had to shut it down. So that was the genesis of it. And while we were running the summer school, I was observing, watching, looking, listening, and I saw that there was something happening underground with young people, an appetite to do this kind of work, but it wasn't being represented, in the upper echelons, let's say, of third level education. So we spent 2 years developing the course, and now we're here.
And so if you take the course, what do you learn?
You learn lots of things. It's a theory-practice nexus. So in your practice, you'll be doing things like multimodal writing for platforms. You'll be doing creative video. You'll be doing podcasting, learning all those storytelling kind of skills. But also, theoretically, it's very interesting what the previous offering was there, talking about the tips and the ideas and how you become an influencer. But we believe that if you've education behind you, doing things like psychology, entrepreneurship, doing celebrity studies, and doing all the kind of fun and interesting things, but things that are educative, will really help insulate people in this industry. If you take a bird's eye view of your practice, you'll be a much better practitioner, and you'll be able to move into other areas like marketing. Because let's face it, Matt, influencing is quite a burnout project, and people have to be very nimble nowadays. Research shows us that people entering the workforce will have 3 careers, not just one. So maybe if you're influencing for 6 to 8 years and you're finding that difficult, you might want to move into things like becoming a digital marketer, or being something like an agent for influencers, or working with corporate clients who employ influencers. So there's really more to it than you think. It does get denigrated, which I'm sure you want to talk about, but there definitely is an industry there, and jobs and roles for people.
Because talk about the denigration. What sort of, if people raise their eyebrows and say a degree in influencing, that this is a job, are you kidding me? What would you say back to them?
Yeah, we've heard a lot of that, Matt. I think, we're academics, so we try to look behind where that's coming from. And what we do see is that the denigration of this kind of work comes back to how it started. So online influencing began really with mummy bloggers, Mumsnet, and let's say influencers that would have been considered pushing female and feminized kind of, what would you call them, life choices. So anything to do with motherhood, women's work, as you know, anything in the home is not always considered work or something that should be fiscally rewarded. And I think that's where the looking down the nose bit comes to it. And it's really unfair and should stop, because first of all, that in itself is wrong, and also influencing is about much more than that. So we find there's a certain kind of person, we've noticed that the word influencer is very triggering for people over 45.
Part of this is also just, if anybody has real concerns around it, as I said, the market in this is something like $22.5 billion. There's a lot of money you could make in this world.
Interestingly, The Economist magazine
Economist
magazine says that by 2025, Gen Z, that's people who were born between 1996 and 2003, will be spending $350 billion on bling. And a lot of that spend is underpinned by influencer recommendations and watching influencers. So it's the posts may be frivolous, but the business is not.
I'll let you go, but just finally, how much demand has there been for this degree? As you said, when you started this out, you couldn't quite believe how many people were interested in this. What has this been like?
Well, it was nuts with the summer school, and our central applications doesn't open for a while yet. So we're bracing ourselves, Matt. We are bracing ourselves.
You feel like an influencer for influencers?
Me personally,
Yeah.
I'm much too lazy to be an influencer. Influencers
Yeah,
really
it's all good
graft.
anyway.
They are serious grafters.
We're going to talk to one now. Irene, thank you very much.
The only thing that's going to make it work is the
You're welcome.
Irene McCormick, Senior Lecturer
Hey,
at
what's it?
Southeast Technological University
Okay.
in Carlow, Ireland.
It never did.
Hi, this is Kaya, aka Comfy Girl Curls, and welcome back to my channel.
Hopefully.
Today's video is another sponsored video brought to you by Maui Moisture,
Yeah.
and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into their Curl Quench and Coconut Oil collection, which
Yeah.
includes a shampoo, a conditioner, and
No,
a curl smoothie,
Maybe
which
you can
we're going
send
to
it
cover in a
with
bit because I used this very
That
wrong
can be
the first
sent.
time.
That's Kaya Marriott and her YouTube channel testing out some new hair products. She is a Canadian influencer in Vancouver. Learning how to love her natural hair led her to an online career, and she recently left her day job and works now as an influencer full-time. Kaya, good morning to you.
yeah.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you got into this and what it was that led you into the
That's good.
influencer world.
As long as
Absolutely. So I
he's growing up.
started almost in the OG
Getting better
days
because
of blogging. I love writing, and
was
I
too
was
much
learning
to-
how to take care of my
I don't know what
natural
the fuck is gonna
curly
happen.
hair texture, and I was looking for an outlet to document that and hopefully help somebody else on that same journey. Somebody learning how to take care of their own texture, looking for products, and hopefully help them out.
How difficult was it to figure out how to do
He
this?
sees something and he wants to try it, which is great. At the same time,
For
you
what
gotta
does he want
There
to go
is
to
so
Helsinki?
much information out there. I think
Yeah,
it's
he
a
did
lot
it
of
for them,
trial and
yeah.
error, a lot of
But you
researching,
don't need a
but
Helsinki.
I'm kind of a firm believer that, you know, somebody out there has done it before. They are out there graciously sharing their knowledge too. So it was a lot of Googling, a lot of
We do
searching
have
on
a
YouTube,
Helsinki.
but it wasn't that hard. The information exists.
You start to do this, and presumably you're doing it for fun, but also you know that there might be an audience
Because
out there.
I
At
can
what
put
point in
two
time
dots
did you start
on
to
the
get
Helsinki
paid
camera.
for what you were creating?
And I can
So
measure
I
the
was
distance
doing
between
it
two dots.
off the side of my desk for about 5-6
How
years
much
before I got my
How
first dollar.
But you
And
need to be
the
acquiring
big
that
pivot for me
information.
was when I
You
actually
need to be
started
recording
changing my
that.
mindset and approaching it more as a business. I started doing more intentional
the
research
programming
around how to
is-
monetize this, how to do income and expense spreadsheets, and really position myself as a business owner. And the moment I did that, honestly,
Oh, yeah.
everything started to change. It was like a domino effect.
But
You've created a
the
series of
reason we got
videos around
camera
this, right? Around talking about how you built a
really
business and how you
should
created a business
know
plan and
the-
thought really intentionally about what you wanted to do.
that thing can
Yeah, I
actually
feel like, again, there's a lot of
take
information
a
out there, but I
video
know nobody
and
really knows where to start. So, similar to me starting my hair journey documenting, I wanted to document my journey as an influencer as well, just to keep that information as accessible as possible and give people those same tools that I maybe was spending hours looking for. They can now go to my YouTube channel and kind of binge watch everything in one place.
Just explain a little
You-
bit
you
about
don't
how this
actually
works.
need
How
a
do you go about negotiating with different brands? They want you to feature, you're influencing people, so they want you to feature their products on your channel. How do you figure out how you're going to get paid for that?
Did you get drunk?
Yeah, so the way it usually works is that brands will reach out to influencers directly. A lot of the work is inbound, and so they'll reach out and say, hey, what are your rates for X, Y, and Z? Usually for me, that's an Instagram post, some stories, maybe a TikTok, and I'll put my rate forward, and then it kind of negotiation starts,
How
not
much you
just
can buy
about
it today?
the money, how much you're
If I
going
can
to get
find you a
paid,
good price in
but
batteries.
there's so much more that goes into it, like licensing fees. Is there exclusivity involved? Do they not want you to work with competitors? Are they going to use your content as ads, put it on their website? I think there's an element to that where a lot of people think influencing is snapping a picture and calling it a day and you get paid a bunch of money, but
OBS
there's a lot
Studio
more that goes
to
on behind the
create a
scenes because
pre-made
influencing is part of a brand's marketing
thing
strategy. So
because
they
now
are
we have
putting
a
a lot
lecture
more
series. We're gonna
thought and
send a lecture.
parameters into it.
You say that
Okay,
you're a
I'm sorry,
medium
I'm not
class
saying
influencer.
like-
What does that mean?
I stay late for
Yeah,
this
so
because it
I
was a
am
big
an
after.
influencer with 17,000 followers on Instagram, and the biggest myth about this space is that you need to have millions of followers in order to make a living off of it. So I consider myself as somebody that is, I'm working, it's like a working class job. I am strategically putting out content. I'm very much approaching it as a business, but I can't live off of it. But I'm not necessarily somebody that blew up overnight and doesn't have to think about anything ever again. Anything I post, everybody's going to swarm in and watch.
This one.
Irene said that she was too lazy to be an influencer, that influencers really graft.
So I
She
did
said,
the
how much work
and
is
it
this?
worked
How
well. I
often?
did the streaming
Tell me about the posting. How
online.
how
It was
often
fucking
do you have to
amazing.
post? How much work is this each day that you're
But-
spending on doing this work?
Okay, so microphone. That
So
building,
I always
that
say there's a
room,
reason
okay,
that I
for
had to
streaming
quit my day
is
job because something
shit.
had to give. Because when I was
has no
balancing it
internet,
around
which
work,
means
I
couldn't
was
use my
working
router.
7 a.m. to 3 p.m.
I couldn't
I
use
would
any
come
wireless
home,
camera.
hit my desk at 4,
Which I wanted to
and work
take
till like
teletext from the
midnight
back.
to 2 a.m. Like
You're
there's
taking
a lot of
Uh,
time commitment
he
to it, and it wasn't
has-
sustainable.
Oh,
In terms of
and
posting,
lights.
I
You
try
can
my
plug
best to
in your
put
laptop.
out a YouTube video on
You
my
can take it in
tips
somewhere.
channel
Yeah.
once a week.
It's-
I try to
it's called the
maintain
Fear
present
Factor.
on my blog once
It
a
was
week.
shit.
2 blogs actually, one for
Because
the hair
amount of
beauty
things that I
content,
had to
one
plug
for the
in,
tips.
it was
I have
gonna be
2
too many
Instagram
fields,
accounts
and
that I
the
try to make
closest
sure I'm
one
getting
was
a couple
right
posts
in
out
front
a
of the
week.
door.
I know some people
So
approach
I had
it
to
very,
go,
very
put a
rigidly
little
where they
bench
have
there,
a
put
daily
the laptop
schedule, but
there,
I just,
have a
my
second
motto is
laptop
try to
doing the
be present
presentation.
and top of mind
I
and
use
be
the
continually
capture
providing
card,
value to my
which is-
audience.
you
And
know the name,
if
right?
that needs to take a
El
couple days
gato,
gap to be able to
the
post
cat.
something that resonates, then I take a couple day gap.
This is now your full-time
Anyway.
job.
Lots of streamer.
Yes.
Fuck this thing.
Can I be
You see
rude?
the
And you can say
fucking
no,
thing, my
but can I
flag,
ask you?
boom.
You don't have to say broadly.
No driver.
How much money are you bringing in?
And I had the little.
I love talking
Ah,
money.
you
I think the
think so?
transparency is so
69
important.
bucks.
Last year, the last 2
Tiny.
years, I hit
And,
about 75K.
to
And
microphone.
this year, I'm hoping and on
I
trend
did
to
not
break
use the
100.
platform at all.
That's
The only thing I used
a lot of
was
money.
the speakers.
Yeah,
And they were
it,
so
it,
fucking
it
loud.
shocks me every day.
No, but in the
But
face
I
of
had a
that, and
problem
this is a
because they
bit of
were-
what I
they
asked
were
Irene, if people are doubters, if people
feeding
say
back on the
this
mic.
isn't a real job, well, what do you say back
But
to them? Part of that is, well, I might, making
brilliant.
$75,000 might make $100,000, but beyond that, what do you say to them?
I got a kid.
I say that it, just like any type of
Maybe use our own.
self-employment or entrepreneurship, it takes so much strategy and time commitment. You need to be constantly pivoting. You're drafting concepts. You're to what she actually said earlier. There's psychological elements.
Yeah.
We're doing research to understand our audience. It's just
Oh, speakers?
it's
Yeah.
digital marketing. It's another form of digital marketing, and I think that
What
people
happens
don't
when you
look
talk?
at digital
The
marketing
speakers
and say
are
that's
facing
not a
you.
real job.
And I was using
And
my own
so,
wireless.
yeah,
speakers.
it's
Because
work, and
theirs,
it has a
guess
real
what?
impact on
I
the market.
think I
What do you
need
make
to
of the fact that people could now get a university degree in this?
I will say my first reaction had been,
Exactly what I
it's
thought.
interesting that
We have
academia seems to want a piece of
We can
pie
buy
that
them.
people have been able to do on their own for so long. Like, I think that part of the beauty of this space is that it's so self-led.
Yeah.
People can go out there and find the information and start today if they wanted to.
No, you're
That being
actually, you're
said,
fucking
I do
right.
think that
Well, because all
there
we need
is a
instead of
benefit in
speakers, we need
having
nothing and
a
nobody.
curated,
I can
structured
do this in a fucking bathroom.
course load, because I think as creators, so much time is spent in that research phase. People can spend years in the research
I went
phase,
to visit the
frozen,
fucking place. It
not
shows
ready
that
to
the
start,
jacks are
or
there. A jack
unable
panel
to
on
really
the
figure
back,
out what they need
so I
until
can control
they
everything.
realize they don't have
And
that
then the
skill
kid-
set.
the IT
So
kid
if you
tells
have it
me,
all in one place,
yeah,
I
but
don't
nothing
think
is
there's
connected.
necessarily a problem in that. But I
I
do
want to
think
shoot
there
myself.
are, it's not a critical aspect to this job.
Well, so I
People,
built a kit.
everyone who's done it learned it
The
themselves.
only thing I'm
So
missing
I think
is
that's kind of something to remember.
Just before I
Oh.
let you go, you've been doing this
And
for a
you know
while.
what, you know what I
Success
do?
is kind of building and building and building. How
You
long
see
do you
this?
see yourself doing this for?
I hope that I
Yeah.
can stick at it a
Only
long
one.
time.
One more,
I do
because-
think that
And you want for this
it will evolve and pivot. I love doing like public
You
speaking
said
opportunities and teaching.
it has
So
a microphone
maybe in like
and guitar.
10 years it might
And the
pivot
guitar
into that.
can
Who knows?
I
Maybe
can
I'll be
set it
teaching a
alive.
course
Yeah.
one day. But I do think it's sustainable because
Yeah,
as
with two
I
mics,
change my views and take on new life experiences, my audience is growing as well.
so I can put
You're kind of already teaching it through that other channel.
Yes.
It would seem like
Yes.
that would be the natural thing. I'm really glad to talk to you about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Kaya Marriott is an online influencer out of Vancouver. You can see what she does at Comfy Girl Curls. That's the current for
So
this
yeah,
Wednesday? No, it's Thursday. It's Thursday
Yeah.
all day.
Put it in a bag.
It's Thursday. Q's up next on CBC Radio 1. The week has kind of gone
Yeah,
by
that'd be
like
awesome.
that. As you heard from Irene and from Kea, it's hard work being an influencer. It's not just all glitz and glamour. Here's a song that perhaps might speak to that. It's Gorillaz and The Tired Influencer. I'm Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening to The Current. We'll see you tomorrow.
Where white blooms above the city. Got sunrise and the freeway glows, perfumed with Palo Santo. Early flights touch down every day, but tide influenza. It's sleeping deep, waiting for an answer. Got a press on brown eyes. Always keep you close beside me. Military, that's the way it's meant to be. It was a different time. I hear that love up in the hills. Logic kills the Silver Lake reflections. Just trying to keep my head up. But nothing real anymore.
This is CBC Radio 1, 91.5 FM in Aurelia. Oscar nominations are a crowning glory for a king.
Why you hit it?
Because I bloody well stammer. The bump from a Grammy win is never shallow. And the box office goes boffo after 1 Tony or 11.
My name is Alexander Hamilton.
Red Carpet Marketing, the business of award shows. On Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. This morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app. The CBC News is next, followed by Q.
One of the biggest movie stars in Bollywood history, Anil Kapoor, is starring in what's being called a game changer for Indian cinema. It's a movie about a young woman and her quest to have her first orgasm. He'll be here to tell you a little bit about why he wanted to be involved and to reflect on his incredible career.
What are you guys going to do about the media?
We're having a meeting with Ballet.
This is CBC News.
Okay.
From CBC Toronto, here's your news at 10 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Nicole Martin. Mostly cloudy, 20 degrees right now, 25 is the high today. An update is expected today on the federal government's pledge to stabilize grocery prices by Thanksgiving. That promise came last month after the government met with Canada's leading grocery store chains. Janice McGregor reports.
Well, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says it's ridiculous to think the industry is going to lower prices on its own. He introduced a private members bill to make changes to the Competition Act, but that's not going to see debate anytime soon. Lower income households that are eligible for the extra GST rebates that the government brought in last spring, they should see their latest installment hit their bank accounts today. Bit of a just-in-time boost to help fill their carts this weekend. There is a government bill up for debate again today that tries to tackle anti-competitive behavior, like the rules that prevent new stores from entering the market, but it's unclear. The government's also going to adopt another NDP idea, that of a corporate windfall tax, actually following through on the Prime Minister's threat earlier this month to make companies pay if they take profits unfairly. That kind of a tax, tricky to enforce without risking yet another cost being passed right on to consumers. Janice McGregor, CBC News, Ottawa.
Over 100 asylum seekers in Toronto are looking for immediate shelter. Dozens had to leave a church in North York last night. The landlord says he needs the space back for upcoming events. Others have been sleeping on the streets in downtown Toronto for a week. Kizito Musa Bimata is the founder of the Rwandan Canadian Healing Centre, a not-for-profit organization providing support to trauma victims. He's been calling on all levels of government since this summer to step up to help newcomers to Canada.
We know what they can do. We know the money's there. So what is the point? Obviously, it's clear that when you look here, all you see is Africans. All we can translate from that is that they don't care about Africans.
He says the three levels of government need to stop pointing fingers at each other and come up with solutions before winter. And Mississauga could soon have 4 plexes across the city if a new motion passes at its city hall. The city has been mandated by the province to add 120,000 homes within the decade. 4 plexes are homes designed to house 4 separate families under one roof. Some say they could help solve a shortage in the missing middle housing options. Ward 2 Councillor Alvin Tejo brought forward the motion.
This isn't where the city would naturally go on its own. Obviously, we need more housing options, and this motion speaks to the fact that there are other solutions, and we can solve that with more infill and more density where we already have existing housing. This is going to be a change for the city if we pass this.
The federal government is pressuring the city to vote yes. The minister in charge of housing, Sean Fraser, said in a letter that Mississauga would be more likely to receive money from Ottawa's Housing Accelerator Fund if it makes moves such as allowing 4 plexes everywhere and increasing density near transit. The motion will be voted on next week. Well, it was a disappointing and short playoff appearance for the Toronto Blue Jays. The Jays were eliminated after a 2-0 loss to the Minnesota Twins.
And that's it. And the Blue Jays season comes to an end.
The Twins swept the series in 2 games, both played in Minneapolis. Minnesota goes on to play the Astros in the AL Division Series. The Blue Jays have now lost 7 consecutive playoff games dating back to 2016. And lastly, this year's winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature has been announced.
The Nobel Prize in Literature is awarded to the Norwegian author Jon Fosse. I've just spoken to Jon Fosse on the phone. He was driving on the countryside north of Bergen in Norway. Not every laureate believes me when I make the call, but he was prepared to have confidence.
That's the Nobel Committee announcement today from Oslo. Jon Fosse is one of Norway's most celebrated and prolific writers. The 64-year-old has written more than 20 plays to go along with numerous novels, children's books, and poetry collections. In honoring Fosse, the Nobel Committee says his writing gives voice to the unsayable. That is the CBC News from Toronto. I'm Nicole Martin. You can always get your local news anytime on our website at cbc.ca/Toronto. This is CBC Radio 1, 91.1. The weather forecast now for Barrie Huronia. A mix of sun and cloud today, chance of showers this afternoon. Windy, a high of 24, feeling like 28 with the humidex. We'll see some showers beginning this evening, risk of a thunderstorm as well, a low of 13 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, showers ending in the morning, then a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 19. For Peterborough and the Kawarthas, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 25 today. We'll see some showers beginning near midnight, a low of 16 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, windy in the morning, showers ending in the afternoon, then mainly cloudy and a high of 19 degrees.
So Anil Kapoor has starred in over 100 movies, been one of the biggest stars in Indian cinema for 40 years now. But he says this new movie he's in, he's never been in anything like it before. And listen, that's not just a line to get you to buy a ticket. When you hear the plot, you'll know where he's coming from. Anil Kapoor will be here to talk about that new film. That's coming up. Plus, how do I describe Carolyn Taylor's new show? Well, she listened to a song on the radio by Whitney Houston. She said, wouldn't that be a perfect song for a gold medal figure skating performance? Carolyn's never figure skated, never choreographed, and she set out to make her dreams come true and to talk gold medal figure skaters into coming on board. And this is a documentary. Carolyn will be here to tell you all about it. I'm Tom Power. You are listening to Q. So yeah, the plot of the Anil Kapoor movie I was just talking about, it's worth hearing. It's about a 30-something single woman named Kanika Kapoor. She gets made fun of a little in school. She grows up to be a food blogger. And like a lot of us, you know, she's looking for love. Through all of her dating life, Kanika has never had an orgasm. And then one night, she has one. But the only problem is she can't quite remember who is in the bed there next to her. But She's going to find out. That's the premise for the new film, Thank You for Coming. It's being called one of the most groundbreaking and important films to come out of India this year. I also think it might just be one of the most popular. I was just looking at the trailer a few minutes ago, and it had like 14 million views. So Anil Kapoor is one of the producers of the film. He also has a cameo as this Silver Fox professor. Anil is one of the biggest stars in Indian film history. He's won countless awards for his work over the years. And if you're not as familiar with Indian cinema, you might know him from being the game show host in the movie Slumdog Millionaire. We talk about that. You might know him from like 24 or Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. Thank You for Coming is the name of the film. It hits cinemas tomorrow, but its world premiere was at this year's Toronto International Film Festival. Anil Kapoor dropped by our Q studio right off a flight from Dubai to talk a little bit about his career. Here's our conversation. You are just a few hours away from the world premiere. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm very excited. It's one of my wishes, one of the, bucket list to come to Toronto for Toronto Film Festival, TIFF as I call it. Just wanted to be there. I was supposed to be here in 2008, 2009, 2008 for Slumdog Millionaire, but my visa didn't come in time, so I couldn't be here. And here I am after so many years, and it happened. And it happened with the film I produced, and I've got a small cameo in the film, and it's produced by my daughter and myself, and directed by my son-in-law. It's all in the family.
What does that mean for you to have this be a family affair with your daughter and son-in-law?
Well, it's tough. It's tough to have the family, making a film with a family. It is not that easy.
Why is that now?
Yeah, because, sometimes, I am a little brutal, when I'm, at least when I'm working. So for me, when I make choices in the film, and if I see something, if I don't like it, or, or whatever it is, or if I have to, if they want something very honest feedback from me, where my work is concerned. And for me, making films, acting films is my work, and that's what I love. So I cannot be dishonest with it. So, and then of course you have to be so brutally honest with your family. And it doesn't matter, she's my daughter or my son-in-law. If I don't like something, I'll have to say it honestly. And that's what I do. So it's painful.
It's hard sometimes.
It's very hard.
Negative, when you have to give hard feedback to members of your family.
Absolutely. But they're used to it because they know that the first time I see the first cut, obviously I just freak out. Or sometimes I see the first cut and I just leave the edit. I say, what is this? That kind of stuff. And when I see the second, no, it's not that bad. Then and then of course I saw the film, and and most of the films my daughter's produced till now have been really inspiring, motivating, something out of the box, something which she's when you talk about films which are headed by a leading lady in India, have always been very not entertaining films, not funny films, not comedies.
Often dramas, tragedies.
Yeah. But, Ria believes that why can't we make entertaining and comedies and fun films with girls?
My understanding is this film is quite groundbreaking. In the description for it at the Toronto Film Festival, it says, this discusses subject matter unlike any we've seen in an Indian film at the Toronto Festival before. What's your perspective on that? Does this film seem groundbreaking to you?
You see, to be honest with you, I've never realized what is groundbreaking as such, because you just listen to it and I go with my gut, with my instinct. And I think somewhere my daughter is not my daughter, not my son, she's my child. And there's a lot, she also takes these kind of decisions which she doesn't realize is going to be groundbreaking. She just likes the story and she likes the way it feels when she hears it, and she wants to work on it, and she believes in it, and she feels it's going to be something I'm very passionately motivated, and we go ahead and do it. And if it becomes groundbreaking, it's not up to us. It's the people who decide is it groundbreaking or not. You cannot want to do something which is just for the sake of that it's groundbreaking or it's different. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know when you make it. When you make a painting or you art, when you act, or you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And the right people have to come together, the right team, the right director, the right cast, and then it becomes what it has to become. Otherwise, instinctively you feel there's something like something new, something which I've never heard, something which I've never been done. very scary it is. It's not the usual stuff you feel, and that's the fun of it.
It's very positive in its way it talks about sex. It's very positive in the way it talks about desire, the way it talks about relationships. I mean, I think that was part of the thing that was seen as groundbreaking.
Yes, yeah, in a way, it is. It is. It's yeah, for us, it's, like, this film is very honest in the casting, in the writers. They all are very, very relatively new. And
except for you, you're a big star.
Yeah, that's the reason they hardly gave me a role in the film. He's the big star. Let's give him the worst role in the film.
Here's the big star. Let's give him 6 lines.
And I'm begging for more lines.
Well, it sounds like you're very proud of your daughter for making this film.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
I want to come back to the film a little bit later, but it's so rare to get an opportunity to talk to you, especially in person. I mean, as you mentioned, this is your first time at the Toronto International Film Festival. I'd like to go back to the beginning of your film career and just ask broadly, what was it that drew you to acting when you were young?
I don't know. I was very fortunate from the time I came into my senses. I just wanted to be an actor. I met a lot of actors and a lot of people in other, who were engineers or scientists or businessmen or entrepreneurs or, doctors, or they always felt they wanted to do something else and they became what they were. But I was very clear from the time I came into my senses. I was, matter of fact, almost 10 or 11 years old when I, without letting anybody know, I auditioned for a film and I got the film as a child actor.
You ran away to audition for that film.
Absolutely.
Tell me that story.
Yeah. I remember, there are these background actors. This friend of mine, his father was the one who, we have these agents who get all these background actors, and the filmmakers and the directors. I said, okay, they have the responsibility. Not only the background actors, but small cameos, small roles, So this friend, his father was, and then he asked me one day very casually, would you like to act? I said, yeah, of course, I love to act. That's what I want to do. So this is one film which is happening, and you have to go to the studio for the audition. And I said, if I tell my parents, they said, you better study. This is time you're just in school, and you want to, become. I said, without informing them, I went. And I did it, and I passed. And then I said, if I tell them I've been accepted and I'm not being, I'm being part of the film, then I said, let me do 1 or 2 days of shooting, one or 2 days of shooting, then I'll tell them, so that they can't throw me out. And my father being a film producer also, he will not want me, to get out of the film and, they have losses. It's unprofessional. He would never want anybody to be unprofessional. So I shot for the film. And after I shot for the film, I told them, I said, I'm doing this film. So that's the story.
How did they take it when they told them?
Well, they had no choice.
But were they happy? Were they?
Well, they were, yeah, I think they were, how parents are, I think when they see the child happy, they're happy, that kind of stuff. Not happy that I become an actor. They're happy that that I'm happy doing that. And then, of course, I followed what I wanted to do, and I finished my school, then I went to college, university, and before I could finish my university, before I could get a degree, I just decided, I said, no, why should I get a degree, or why should I finish my studies? Let me get into acting. And I started acting very young, and I've been in this business since 43 years now.
There's the craft, right? There's acting.
Yeah.
It's your work. As you said, I've been busy for 40 years, and I've been doing that work my entire life. That's a thing you can control. You can control when I show up to work. I know my lines. I know how to give. I know how to do what I do. And you strike me as that kind of person.
Because I love it.
Yep.
Because I'm passionate about it.
There's the other thing, which is the fame part of the equation, which we don't ask for, which comes along with that other part. How did you find because you're very famous, how did you find when the fame started to enter your life?
But I felt that this will give you more job opportunities.
Yeah.
For me, it was just getting more job opportunities. So I was, I took it not in a way that fame, for me, I said this fame, I might get more films. I'll get more opportunities to work with better filmmakers, directors, better stories will come to me. That's the way I tackle. I really not got excited about that, but I was more excited that I'm going to get more work.
It didn't impact your life? It didn't interfere with your life?
No, it's the same. I just get up in the morning and I just look forward to being on the set. I look forward to prepping for my role. I look forward to telling stories. I look forward to making my director happy. I look forward to... I'll just do anything for if someone asks me that, okay, I'll pay you so much and I want you to do this, or if I do this, it'll help my film become, more people are going to watch it. If they ask me a little, 10%, I would rather give them 100%, and that's the way I've tackled my life, my career, and my personal and professional life. Like, for example, when I was friendly to this beautiful girl. I started dating her, and then I fell in love with her, and I had to make a choice. I said, being in this business, show business, everybody said, no, I think you should delay your having this serious relationship and getting married. It'll affect your career.
Yeah.
I said, it doesn't matter. For me, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because I believe in my hard work, not these other things which will make me more popular.
Yeah. You have trust in yourself.
I trusted myself, and I said I'm going to get married to her, and I'm with her. We're together since 50 years now.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Could I ask you about Slumdog Millionaire?
Yeah, sure.
It's the last time you were supposed to be in Toronto, you mentioned it was for Slumdog Millionaire. You didn't get the visa in time. You weren't able to come over. That's when a lot of people. That's when I was first introduced to your work, was through Slumdog Millionaire.
Right.
You were giving joy for the phone dollars, and now you're richer than they will ever be. What a player! Ladies and gentlemen, what a player!
Tell me a little bit about how that role came to you.
See, I think Danny was in India, and I think he must have spoken to Loveleen, who was she was a co-director, and she was the casting director too. I assume or presume that he must have spoken to her that this is the kind of a role it is, and of course, it's always the kind of work you've done in the past, your body of work, and being a professional and being someone. And he must have seen some of my work, and he felt that I was the right choice. And another producer called The Brace, who was the executive producer, who was trying to get in touch with me. They sent me the script, and they said, Danny Boyle is directing the film. And to be honest with you, I was aware of him, but I'd forgotten about him.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
To be honest with you. Then my son was a huge fan of Trainspotting, and I was in UK for some show or something like that, and he had asked me to get the poster for Trainspotting.
Choose life, choose a job, choose a career, choose a family, choose a television, choose washing machines, cars, compact displays, and electrical tin openers.
And his poster was there on his in a room on his wall, and he was a huge fan of Danny Boyle. He was a young kid, and but I said, Dad, that's Danny Boyle, he's director of Trainspotting. And then I realized, after Titanic, the next film DiCaprio did was The Beach, and he did it with Danny Boyle. There must be something special about this director. And I said, done, I'm going to do this film. I said, read the script. I said, no, I'm doing this film. You read it. Then I read the script. He read the script. I read the script. I loved it. I loved the role. And obviously, I was reading the whole script, but I was looking at my lines. I said, do I have enough, me too, And I met him, and he says, and we started discussing, and he says, I want you for the film. I said, done. I'm doing the film. I met the producer. The producer said, well, we know how much you that's the kind of remuneration you take for your Indian films, but we can't afford to give you that kind of money because it's a small independent film that you're making. I said, well, ask for the money. I want to work with Danny Boyle. I want to do this film. I want to learn something doing this film. It's an international film. I've never done an English film in my life. I've always spoken my mother tongue, which is Hindi. I've done Indian film, never done a really international film. So for me, it will be something for me to express myself in English will be something which I've never done. So I said yes. And that's the way I started working on the film.
That film ends up becoming a massive success internationally, and one of the things it does is it starts opening up to you, as you mentioned before, to some films in Hollywood. All of a sudden, you started making more international television shows and more Western television shows and American television shows and films. What was the biggest difference you saw between the system that you kind of came into in Hollywood versus the system that you came from in India?
What really surprised me when I came to shoot for 24 here, I was in Los Angeles for 6 months and I started shooting, and I said, this is the way they shoot television over here. It's like a massive, it's about 300-400 people. It's massive. The scripts were coming in, and the prep and the detailing, and then the blue draft and the green draft and the red draft. All these drafts kept on coming, and the detailing and everything. And I said, oh, wow, it's terrific. Yeah. I've never seen, I never imagined the television can be so huge and so big and such budgets. It was one of the biggest budgets at 24 at that time when it started. It's a mother of all thrillers, 24. So I was really taken aback. And then, of course, when I was privileged and honored to be part of Mission Impossible 4, and when I landed in Dubai, I shot in Toronto also for Mission Impossible 4. And I said, this is like a war. I said, you have a trial for your suit or clothes, and I saw it was like thousands and thousands of clothes and people, and it was a massive studio film. So that also came as a very big surprise to me. The budgets and the massiveness of the studio film, which was Mission Impossible 4. So that was completely. We don't have those kind of budgets in India, and the difference, of course, now. I think everything is very, the gap is becoming lesser and lesser in terms of, because of the, like earlier, if I had to audition or if you had to be in LA to meet all the executives and meet and actors, directors and casting directors. And now, it's just technology and and people, they get in touch with you directly, and you have a Zoom call or or that kind of stuff. So the world is shrinking. But
doesn't that go for film distribution too? Like if you look at when you first started out, I mean, you were making these films that were, in order to see them, you probably had to be in India or you had to visit certain cinemas in Canada, and then you do Slumdog Millionaire, which has a bigger worldwide release. Now, thanks to, you mentioned earlier, Disney Plus or Netflix or Hulu, as you mentioned earlier, all of a sudden it feels to me like there's more of an opportunity for films and filmmakers and TV shows to be seen around the world. Do you know what I mean?
For the consumers, it's great, and for content creators, and for us actors, technicians, writers. It's brilliant, absolutely fantastic.
But that means that the films that you make in India now can be seen internationally much more easier, and they can become massive international hits, right?
Absolutely.
Do you feel that difference now as opposed to years ago?
Of course. And I feel more and more is going to happen now. More and more stories will be, and hopefully we make more shows which will resonate all over the world. Not yet, but we will.
I think this film has a great opportunity to do so. Thank you for coming.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, but it is. I mean, I think it has an opportunity to be a massive crossover success. The last thing I'll ask you before you go, because I know you have to.
Why last thing you ask?
You have to go somewhere else. I was told you have to go.
No, I'll stay here tonight.
Yeah,
sorry, red carpet. I have to go for the red carpet.
You have to go to the red. You know what? I'll go to the red carpet for you. You can stay here. How about that? That's okay. That sounds like a good idea to me. You've said that you learn something from everybody you work with. You learn something from everybody you work with. But at this stage, and thank you for coming of your career, you're working with a lot of younger people. You're working not just with your children, but you're working with younger actors. Do you still learn new things when you're working with people who are younger than you in the business?
But I think I'm the youngest. I swear, I mean it. I believe in it.
Tell me that. Tell me what you mean.
Because it's I think age is in your mind, and. Because I'm still a child. I want to learn. I'm a kid in a toy shop, and I feel I'm in the Disney world, and I don't feel old. I don't feel like a veteran. I feel like a newcomer. And when I'm on the set or when I'm reading a scene or prepping for a film, I'm excited. I don't feel my mind is still like an 18-year-old. You know, I might be 66, but my mind is still like an 18-year-old, 22 when I started my career. Yeah, I feel it. I think that's the way that keeps me going. And that's what's going to keep me going for many more years. My mind is still like
I'm glad to hear that. Such a joy to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Tom.
A great honor to have the great Anil Kapoor into our studio. He has we'll say a cameo. He has a small role in the new film.
The smallest.
There are no small roles.
There are small actors.
Just
But yes, I produced this film.
And the producer of this
So
new
I'm
film.
here more as a producer, not as an actor.
You're right, but it's nice to see you in it as well.
But I drink up slowly, 'cause I don't wanna go home. I wanna see you back it up one time now. Back it up 2 times. Back it up and rewind now. I wanna see you pull up, yeah. Gotta get the wine and dance, sweet girl. Tryna jump in your mood. Gotta get the wine and dance, sweet girl. You got me winding up on you. Gotta get the wine and dance, sweet girl. Tryna jump in your mood. Gotta get the wine and dance, sweet girl. You got me winding up on you.
That is Desi Wine by Karan, Nikita Gandhi, The Rish, and Arjun. It's from the new Hindi sex-positive comedy, Thank You for Coming. Before that, my conversation with the legendary Anil Kapoor, the internationally renowned actor. Anil has a cameo and is a producer of the film. Thank You for Coming had its world premiere at this year's Toronto International Film Festival, and it's going to be in theaters from tomorrow. All right, if you're listening to this show or podcast with a speaker in your car right now, you have something in common with the comedian Carolyn Taylor, who heard a song driving around in her car with her girlfriend, and she'll tell you how hearing that song ended with her choreographing a full figure skating routine for gold medalists. That's coming up. I'm Tom Power. Q is back after this.
CBC Toronto, mostly cloudy, 20 degrees. I'm Nicole Martin. Here are your top stories. The federal government is expected to offer an update today on its pledge to stabilize grocery prices. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne met with CEOs of the country's biggest grocers last month and gave them until Thanksgiving to come up with a plan to make food more affordable. And over 100 asylum seekers in Toronto are looking for immediate shelter. Dozens had to leave a church in North York last night. The landlord says he needs the space back for upcoming events. Others have been sleeping on the streets in downtown Toronto for a week. The Rwandan Canadian Healing Centre, a not-for-profit organization providing support to trauma victims, has been calling on all levels of government since this summer to step up to help newcomers to Canada. The centre says the 3 levels of government need to stop pointing fingers at each other and come up with solutions before the winter. More news ahead at the top of the hour on CBC Radio 1. The weather forecast now for Barrie Huronia. A mix of sun and cloud today, chance of showers this afternoon. Windy, a high of 24, feeling like 28 with the humidex. We'll see some showers beginning this evening, risk of a thunderstorm as well, a low of 13 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, showers ending in the morning, then a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 19. For Peterborough and the Kawarthas, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 25 today. We'll see some showers beginning near midnight, a low of 16 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, windy in the morning, showers ending in the afternoon, then mainly cloudy and a high of 19 degrees.
I'm Tom Power. You're listening to Q. I'm so excited for you to hear this because I think this is my favorite TV show of this season, and I'll do my best to describe it. The best way I can describe it is, you know that feeling when you're driving in your car and it's a nice night and the windows are a little bit down and a really good song comes on, something with feeling, something that brings you back to your childhood. I don't know, something like this.
Don't walk away from me.
Unbelievable. Whitney Houston, 1992, song called I Have Nothing. So yeah, let's put ourselves back there. You're driving along, you're caught up in the moment. You start to picture yourself as the main character in the music video or dancing to it or playing it on stage with a big audience in front of you. Carolyn Taylor had that feeling one day in 2014 as she was driving with her girlfriend and she was listening to the song you just heard, and right away she knew that she had to choreograph a full-length, professional, Olympic-level pairs figure skating routine to the song. Now, Carolyn Taylor, if you don't know her, is an artist, a comedian, an actor, writer, director, and showrunner from Canada. She co-created and starred in one of the best Canadian comedy shows of all time, Baroness von Sketch Show. All those things that I just told you that Carolyn is, that's true. Comedian, actor, writer, director. This is important. She's not a choreographer. She's not a figure skater. She never has been. But she ends up getting in touch with figure skating royalty like Kirk Browning and Brian Orser, plus a bunch of gold medalists who she'll tell you about. Most importantly, when you watch the show, you get to see someone learn how to live out their lifelong dream. Again, I just love the show. Carolyn joined me in our studio to talk about it. The show is called I Have Nothing. Here's my conversation with Carolyn Taylor. How are you?
Hi, Tom. I'm well, thank you.
I think this is the coolest and weirdest and funniest and best show I've seen in so long.
What?
Congratulations.
Thank you,
it's so
Tom.
good. Can we get to the story here?
Yeah, sure.
So, Whitney Houston, are you a big Whitney Houston fan growing up?
Listen, I grew up with Whitney Houston, so listening, as a kid when Greatest Love of All came out, I was a young teen, and I was like, oh, yes, I learned about self-esteem from Whitney all at once. Do you know that one? That
no.
Track? Anyway, it's all at once.
Oh, yeah.
Drifting on.
Yeah.
All at once, I'm drifting on along the sea, wishing you'd come back to me.
And my dog had died, and I played it over and over, sad. So I grew up with Whitney, but I wasn't like her number one fan, but she was part of my life. I love, Whitney, for sure. And then, of course, The Bodyguard came out in 92, and so I would have heard the song, like any of us, but it wasn't until I heard it on this particular occasion in the car that I think it was 2014, and I'm like, oh my God, it was just clear, crystal clear.
Where were you going?
I think I was driving to the Eastern Townships.
Okay.
I think it was winter. Yeah.
And the song comes on the radio?
It comes on, well, it actually was on a CD. In the stand-up, I say it was the radio, but in truth, I think it was a CD. Who knows? It came on, and I heard the song, and I turned to my girlfriend. I was like, oh my God, this song has to be a full-length professional Paris figure skating routine. And I became obsessed. I'm like, do you hear the jump? Like, I had to get her to understand, and anyone else to understand, like, hey, listen to this song. Like, it just seemed so abundantly clear that you could win gold with this song. And my reference point was really the 88 Olympics, because that was when I followed skating the most, the sort of early 90s, late 80s, early 90s was when I was really fixated. And so I populated the routine with Katarina Witt in my mind and Kurt Browning, two singles skaters doing a Paris routine.
I mean, that would have been enough, right? Because you were doing that in your stand-up. You did it in your stand-up.
So then I did it on stage. So it kicked around in my head for 2 years, and then I'm like, maybe I'll try it on stage. So I try it on stage to see, and I play the song, I land the jumps, I do a little preamble.
Big laughs.
Big laughs. People are laughing, really responding. And so I do that for a while, but a bit of a dilettante. Sometimes here or there. Then I start doing it, and May and I did it together in Halifax. We were on a double bill, and Mae Martin. And then I start telling the audience I'm going to do it one day. Why did I say that, Tom? I got carried away, and they're laughing, and I'm like, oh yeah, network's going to be like, well, what do you want to do after Baroness? I'm like, oh, and they're going to greenlight this thing. Like, what? And the audience would laugh. And that was a joke in the set.
Yeah, and then
the pandemic hit, and then I was like, well, why not? Like, how would I do this? I had a lot of time on my hands, and so I just started thinking it through and talked to an editor, Dana McLeod in Montreal, and we were working on a little sizzle, and then I brought on Zach Russell, who's amazing, another executive producer and director on the show, and Zach and I just dug deep, and we're like, okay, how would we do this? And we did a sizzle with Catalyst. They came on, they were the producers, and Blue Ant, who got behind the show, and so we produced a sizzle to try to sell it.
But hold on, but bypassing the thing that I find the most interesting here, which is that you say to the people in the audience of your comedy show, I'm going to do this, and then you go home during the pandemic and you think, oh, maybe I'll actually do this, and then you kind of skip ahead to, so I had to get some production. No,
so then
Caroline, you don't know how to choreograph or how to do choreographed figure skating.
I know. I don't know, Tom. I was possessed. Like, something was leading me, and I'm like, okay, I guess. And it just, like, these doors kept opening, and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'll learn. And
was there a moment where you were like, okay, I gotta do it now?
Well, yeah. And a bit like, and the worst is I was saying I need to be a choreographer who skates, because there are many choreographers who don't skate, who can choreograph a routine but don't have to be on the ice. But somehow it's like, no, and I skate, and so the joke I had to pay off the joke, and then it became real.
Why were you obsessed with the 1988 Winter
Olympics in Calgary
so much?
Theme song, the best. Are you too young?
I'm too young. I was born 87.
Jeez, okay. It's anyone out there who is from Calgary, or anyone who's old enough will know this song. It's a bum 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 bum. Does this mean anything to you? David Foster wrote both I Have Nothing and the Calgary theme song.
That's nice.
So I'm like, I think I just turned 14 or 15, in my aunt's living room, and it's that time, it's pre-internet. I think I'm on my March break or February break, and I'm fixated. I'm seeing Katarina Witt in her Carmen outfit, like doing the Carmen routine, and the Battle of the Bryans, Battle of the Carmens, and I'm just like, who's that?
Well, that was smashing.
Yes, solid opening. And I'm obsessed, and this is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I don't know that I say this in the show, but I say I'm closeted about being closeted. I'm not in touch with my sexuality. I'm just like, I cannot take my eyes off her, and I'm like, and I guess it was that time. It was riveting. There was a lot of narrative around it. It was the Cold War, right? East versus West.
Yeah.
She was the villain. You're supposed to be cheering for, Liz Manley or Debbie Thomas. And of course I'm cheering for Liz Manley. She's amazing. She's Canadian. But it was like my heart was with Katarina.
Yeah. It was like the Soviet Union was involved. East Germany, West Germany. Oh,
and it was like, the Reagan era. Like, it was big time. We were on the edges of our seats.
So I want to go back to the I don't know how to choreograph, but I'm going to choreograph anyway. I'm going to be a choreographer who skates, but I don't, I'm not that strong a skater.
Yeah.
Is there something in you that's like, because one of my favorite parts of this documentary, and the non-funny side, is people saying to you, you can't do this.
Right.
Like, you keep that in the documentary.
Oh, yeah.
People go, Carolyn, you just know way you can do this. Like, real people are saying to you, you can't do this.
Yeah.
There's something there that you're like, well, come on, I'll show you.
A little. I do respond well to pushback. So I think, like a lot of us, it's like someone says, you can't. You're like, can't I?
Yeah.
And like, well, let's see. And it was just sort of one bite at a time. Like, it was like, okay, well, can I do this? Well, can I do that? And then it just, momentum builds, confidence builds, and the next, it's like you're working with Katya Gordieva and David Peltier. Like, what? I still can't actually reconcile that with my 14-year-old self. I can't.
To tell the folks at home who those two skaters are again?
Yes. Okay, so Katya Gordieva, she won the 88 Olympics with her partner, Sergei Grinkov, so Gordieva and Grinkov. They skated the most perfect routine. If you go back to 88, they were perfection. And they were never going to fall, they were never going to make a mistake, and they were artful, right? Like, they had it all. And then they won again at Lillehammer in 94. Wow, so she has 2 gold medals. And I watched her, because she was 16, I'm 14 or 15, so I'm like, oh, you're a contemporary, right? And I'm like, how is she doing this? Like, I couldn't believe it. She was the most perfect skater I'd ever seen. And then David Pelletier won gold in 2002 at Salt Lake City.
Canadian.
Yeah, Canadian. David Pelletier, yeah.
Legend.
Strong. David Pelletier can, like, lift people at a bar for fun, like, just as a party trick.
Well, take me to the first day of rehearsals with them. What's going through your mind?
I'm terrified. Like, I'm literally terrified. I'm meeting Katya Gordieva, and she's going to do this, and of course I didn't say this in the show because I'm too superstitious, but I was having nightmares, or I had a nightmare that Katya fell and, like, something bad happened, and I was like, oh God, if I break Katya Gordieva, like, she's, you know, a goddess, right? And so I was nervous. I didn't want to do anything wrong, you know, that brought harm to them on the ice. And
in this video,
and they were skeptical, but warm.
Before
they
you
were
paste this
warm
code
and
into your website
skeptical.
or blog,
And then it was like, let's hit the ice. And they're serious. Like, they don't
Hello?
want to mess around. Like, and there's things I learned from Sandra Bezic. Like, oh, you don't. They can't get cold. You can't warm them up and then stand on the ice and chit chat, because then they're going to get cold, and that's when people get hurt.
To tell the folks at home who Sandra Bezic is?
Oh, Sandra Bezic, like one of the greatest choreographers.
How you doing?
She choreographed, the first routine I was aware of was Brian Boitano's Napoleon gold medal routine in 88. Like, oh, you have to watch that. That was, I mean, Brian Orser's routine was beautiful too, but Boitano won the gold. And then she's worked with, you know, Underhill and Martini, the sexiest routines. Like, oh my God.
Serious choreographer.
Serious choreographer. And with Katarina Witt, Carmen on Ice, you know, Kurt Browning, Singing in the Rain, Casablanca, like the great routines.
What I found interesting about this part is you're, seasoned performer in this country for a long time. One of my favorite moments is you're an improv performer, and I believe there's a moment where you kind of go like, well, yeah, and then we'll figure some stuff out, and then you do this jump, and then you do this, and then we'll figure some stuff out. And they say to you, like, hey, in figure skating, there's no improv. There's no we're going to figure this, or like, we'll get hurt.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
That was a horror show in my brain, because I didn't understand. When I said I'm going to be a choreographer, I thought that meant, oh, I know where the jumps are. You listen to the Whitney Houston song, anybody, you'll hear jumps, you'll know where the throws and the jumps are. So one, the skaters were like, well, we don't jump anymore, like, we're 50, and they're still, like, amazing. But they're incredible, and they can do the death spirals and the lifts and everything. But the jumps that I was like thinking about, I was then like, okay, I gotta replace those. But they were like, no, the choreography is all the moments that you keep saying we'll figure something out. No, that's the stuff, and you have to tell us exactly. Like, put my hand here, hold her this way. You don't just say have fun, because someone will get hurt. And there was a moment where they kind of did, because we were kind of playing around a bit. And
yeah. So let's listen to a clip from the show. This is you with your own take on some figure skating elements.
So I'm going to call that slow-mo 1, 2, 3 jog, you know. That's like Boitano's spread eagle in 88, so I call it eagle 88, and this is like eagle 176, or double eagle, or...
76?
88 times 2.
Okay.
What's that?
Should we call it the seesaw?
Yeah, I call it the seesaw. Like, there's this sort of thing, and then, well, I mean, it continues on, but I really, into a stop glide, into a sliding stop. I don't know.
That's from the new Crave comedy series, I Have Nothing. I'm speaking with one of the creators, executive producers, and stars of that show, Carolyn Taylor. I love that, by the way. Just coming up with your own vernacular.
Well, that's where the improv and they said you can name the thing so that you're able to tell us. So tell us what you want to call it, but they like show you something like running slow-mo 1, 2, 3. That for the audience. It's when you lift up and they're sort of running slow-mo in the air. Yeah. I don't actually know if that's a move, but we were trying that. So that's slow-mo 1, 2, 3 jog. But yeah, your brain, like my brain was in hyper focus, Tom. Like there were times where I wanted to 100% stop. I'm like, I'm not up to this challenge. I'm on the ice. They're looking at me saying, well, what next? Tell me what to do next. And as an improviser, I'm like, well, let's feel it out. And it's like, no, we have 4 days, and that's not a lot of time.
And
even
they can't get cold. We
can't get cold, and there's time limits and breaks and all that stuff. So we've got to get this thing done.
Wow.
And having to give them answers. And I'm a person who doesn't like to finalize something until the final moment. I like to leave the window open for magic to come in. So I'm always reluctant to be like, we're for sure doing this here. I'm like, well, let's see, how does it feel?
Yeah.
And so that was one of the challenges, the sort of, I don't know, is it a dialectic between chaos and control?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the most, so like Pelletier,
Yes.
Gordieva.
Yes.
Also Sandra Bezic.
Yes.
Kurt Browning's in this.
Yes.
He shows up.
Brian Orser.
What is the most surprising thing about these people?
How incredibly kind and generous they are with their time, their sport. They love their sport.
You thought they might be a bit cold?
Well, I didn't know. Would they be like, yeah, I'm coming in. Like, I don't know if I expected that, but I was overwhelmed with how warm they were, how generous, how much they wanted to help, and how open they were. I mean, Paul Martini at first was like, we met on a Zoom call, he's like, are you kidding? No one's ever going to do this. Like, he's laughing.
Yeah,
whoever is going to say yes.
Yeah.
But even he came around, and he was wonderful. So even if they had resistance at the beginning, they were really generous and playful, and they all really love each other and love their sport and want to elevate it and bring more attention to it. So I just hadn't understood what a community they are. They were with Katharina Witt when the wall fell in Berlin. Like, they've known each other for so long. So it was really cool seeing them all hang out too. I was like, oh, I'm okay. I'd just be happy to just watch them hanging out.
It's all affection. I mean, there's no shortage of figure skating stuff that's like makes fun of figure skating.
Yeah.
There's TV shows and movies. I'm thinking of movies that make fun of figure skating. Never the case. Love and affection. Joke's on you.
Joke's on me always.
Right.
That was one of the guiding principles, and I assured everyone I worked with, the joke will always, it's not going to be a show where the non-actors are the joke. Like, I will look, if anyone's going to look dumb, unhinged,
You had to say that to them, I bet.
I said that to everyone I worked with, the crew, everyone.
Yeah.
Like, don't worry, I'll be the one who looks foolish. It will not be you. So, and I gave them my word, and I will work to the best of my abilities. And sometimes, as a comedian, you want to have that kind of critical distance, and there is the tendency, I like, observing and satirizing and commenting, and to say, I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to leave that, which is really scary. When that was me leaving my comfort zone as well, beyond the ice and the choreography, but to just try to live it and be there and sacrifice some of the jokes sometimes for the truth. And then the jokes came in a real way. And then, of course, we engineered, a few fun things, of course. But
is there something here about, following a dream? You obviously love figure skating and love choreography, and maybe you felt like, hey, that's not really a place for me. I don't come from that world.
Yes.
That's not really where I belong.
Yeah.
But I can tell, jokes aside, that you really wanted to be there, and it was really important to you. Is there something here about following a dream, even if people are telling you or it doesn't feel realistic to you?
Yeah, there is, and that there are multiple ways into your dreams. You may not be the Olympian who's, I may never have had the body or the discipline or the skill or anything to, pursue the dream as a figure skater or to be one. And in fact, when I was little, I didn't like being on skates. My feet were cold. I didn't like it. I wasn't drawn to become one. I just liked to watch it. So I would say with dreams, where do you fit in? It's interesting. Your dream, you don't have to be the character you think you're going to be. You might arrive later, and it may not be right away. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's not too late. I was 49, heading off to do this thing. What?
It's not too late, occurred to me while I was watching this thing.
Well, and we're valorizing, everyone's, at least midlife, or not everyone, but a lot of the main cast have lived some life and are amazing.
Does accomplishing a very hard task that you didn't think possible change you when you go back to your day job, when you go back to your art form, when you go back to comedy? have you brought that back to other parts of your life?
I think what it is, beyond the actual skills of learning skating and choreography, etc., it's facing fears. They come right up to you, and when you have a contract and you're contractually bound to a show and you're doing it, natural me would have said, oh, Tom, do you want to turn now? I'm done. Like, I tried to choreograph them. I came out as far as I can. Who else wants to turn? Like, that would be my natural state in that moment.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, no, you don't have that option, first of all. Yeah. And you can't, and this is your dream, and you've got to go through, and people are like, oh, do you not have fear? It's like, no, all I have is fear.
Right.
And then you have to go through the fear, and then confidence does build the more, and then a new fear will come.
Yeah.
So the fear is either, oh, Katya's going to fall and hurt herself. Oh, now that went away, because you know she knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
And then new fear, oh, you're not communicating well with her. Oh, now you've communicated well, but does it look right? Are they happy with it? New fear, are they going to be able to do it on the day? New fear, like it just, and you have to keep going through the fears. So in answer to your question, yes, it does build confidence to face your fears one fear at a time, and they don't stop the fears.
Yeah.
Like, they just keep coming.
I love that.
So, but it does, and if you say no to it, it just gets bigger, and when it comes next time, it's going to be bigger.
Yeah.
You still can overcome it. I feel like am I a motivational speaker now?
But it's beautiful. Come on, this is real stuff.
This is the real stuff, yeah. And then it comes back bigger and scarier, and then you have to get even bigger to go through it. And
you had to do all that on camera with the greatest figure skaters of all time.
Of all time.
This is why I started the interview by saying I didn't just say it's the funniest show I've seen in a long time, but it's like the weirdest and best and most complicated and most inspiring show, because in addition to feeling like, yeah, you're really funny and I laughed a lot, but I also thought about all that stuff, about facing fear, about confidence, about meeting our heroes and what they're actually going to be like. And it's so good, Carolyn. I think it's going to do so well.
Thank you.
Congratulations on it. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Tom.
Carolyn Taylor is one of the creators, executive producer, and the star of the new series, I Have Nothing, which is out now on Crave. I'm Tom Power. You're listening to Q. And if you go to our podcast, Q with Tom Power, wherever you get your podcasts, you'll have access to the interviews we've done on the show over the past little while. Musicians like Mick Jagger or Phoebe Bridgers, filmmakers like Emma Seligman or Seth Rogen, and you'll hear our conversation with the acclaimed Canadian photographer, Edward Bertinsky. Now, if you don't know Ed, when he was a student, a teacher gave him this assignment that ended up changing his life. The teacher said, go out and capture photographic evidence of humans. And from that day on, Ed decided to find the most dramatic examples of how we, as a species, have changed this planet. Like whether it be photos of quarries or oil fields or dams or factories. One of my favorites he's taken is this massive yard where these massive cruise ships go to be retired and torn apart. And I guess I never thought about what happens to cruise ships when we're done with cruise ships. This has been his life's work for more than 40 years. I got to talk to Edward Bertinsky not that long ago, and he told me about how he came to interpret that first assignment he got when he was in school. Take a listen to this.
From a photographic point of view, I thought, why not show the greatest technological feats, the excavation of huge open-pit mines, the building of metropolises, the factories that go on and stretch endlessly. All of these things would be a fascinating kind of report card to some other intelligent civilization, to how far along we've got in terms of our own civilization and what we're doing. So it really did give me the kind of, I guess, a license to go out there and observe, even though I'm implicated in all of it, but I become the observer. And I think if you're a photographer, you are, in a way, by default in the observer mode, but this gave me a chance to actually think of the whole species and our impact, and understanding that, even back then, we were all looking at the human population growth, and when I was born, it was like 2.5 billion people.
Right.
And so in my lifetime, we've tripled, or more than tripled, as a population. So in that hockey stick curve, I also understood that resources were going to start to get scarce, that, there's going to only so much farmland that be arable, there's only so much fresh water, there's only so much copper that's easily available. So these are all things that I thought made for an interesting kind of life's work. It was a big enough idea that I can just go into it.
You saw it then. You saw a life's work then.
A life's work back then.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a little bit of my conversation with the photographer Ed Bertinsky, who has a show on now at the Arsenal Contemporary Museum in Montreal, if you're listening to the show right there. It's called Les Paysages Abstraits. That show is on until October 15th. If you want to hear the full conversation with Edward and you want to have access to our archive of conversations here on Q, go to our podcast feed, Q with Tom Power, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Approaching thunder, shelter you under me. Just a drop, babe, I'd do anything for the waters of your love. For the waters of your love, for the waters of your love, for the waters of your love, I'd do anything. Approaching lightning, divine timing, baby, enlighten me. Just a drop, babe, I'd do anything for the waters of your love. For the waters of your love, for the waters of your love, for the waters of your love, I'd do anything. All my affection, all my attention. Tell me how you like it, I like it, when I can bring you satisfaction. And all my devotion, all my emotion. Tell me how you like it, I like it, when I can move you like an ocean. Just a drop, babe, I'd do anything for the waters of your love.
I love that song so much. Evangeline Gendel's new record is called Where the Diamonds Are, and that's a song called Waters here on Q. Tomorrow on the show, the writer Emma Donoghue has been writing her new novel for decades. It's called Learned by Heart. It's the story of two teenagers who fall in love at their boarding school in the early 1800s. These two teenagers really existed, and Emma's been researching the relationship for decades. She'll be here to tell you what she finds so fascinating about them. That's tomorrow on the show. We'll see you soon. Later on.
This is CBC Radio 1, 92.3 FM in Halliburton.
There are many lists of great things, novels, songs, athletes, but what about the greatest numbers of all time? 1 may be the loneliest number, but don't mess with 0. Why is 3 so magical? And 9, it's everywhere. Hi, I'm Nala Ayed. Join me for the series The Greatest Numbers of All Time on Ideas. And 5, don't get me started on 5.
Ideas. Catch past episodes on demand on CBC Listen. The CBC News is next, and then it's Commotion.
Exciting news, the Hollywood writers' strike has come to an end, and that means late-night television is back. You're going to hear how Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Fallon, and the rest of the gang have handled their first week back, and whether anyone really actually missed late-night talk shows at all.
This is CBC News. From CBC Toronto, here's your news at 11 o'clock. Good morning, I'm Nicole Martin. Mostly cloudy, 22 degrees right now. We'll see a high of 25 today. We're expecting an update today from the federal government on efforts to lower grocery prices. The Liberals met last month with the bosses of Canada's biggest grocers, but NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has low expectations.
I see no chance at all that greedy CEOs that have driven up the cost of food and making record profits will in any way on their own bring down the price of food.
The federal government gave the grocery leaders a Thanksgiving deadline to come up with a plan to make food more affordable. Toronto's Integrity Commissioner has found that former Mayor John Tory broke the city's code of conduct twice. Jonathan Batty says Tory failed to observe the city's human resources policies by failing to disclose his relationship with a staffer to the commissioner. And he says the former mayor should have declared a conflict of interest regarding the city's World Cup bid in 2022 because by that time, the woman who Tory was continuing to have an affair with had moved on to work with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. On 4 other issues, Batty says Tory did not contravene the code. The commissioner does not recommend any council penalty as Tory no longer holds office. He resigned as mayor in February after admitting publicly to the extramarital relationship. Over 100 asylum seekers in Toronto are looking for immediate shelter, some who had to leave a church last night and others who have been sleeping on the streets in downtown Toronto. Anam Khan has the story.
Since the summer, Dominion Church in North York has been housing hundreds of asylum seekers turned away by the city's shelter system. The church says 100 of them who were sleeping on chairs in the banquet hall were asked to leave. One of them was Ruth Milley, who arrived from Uganda last week.
I was just moving from different shelters to the other, but I was not able to go in one specifically until I came here.
Miriam Katessa is the site manager of the church.
It wasn't supposed to be a sleeping zone, and now the landlord wants his space back because he has so many functions coming up this weekend.
Refugees downtown find themselves in a similar situation. Yesterday afternoon, about a dozen asylum seekers were outside a city support center on Peter Street. Reverend Alexa Gilmore is a United Church minister who has been providing food to the asylum seekers there.
We are right back at the numbers that we had at the top of the crisis in the summer.
She says the city's additional 250 summer-only beds offered a Band-Aid solution. And with the cold weather approaching, many refugees fear what's to come. Anam Khan, CBC News, Toronto.
Fourplexes could soon become much more common across the city of Mississauga if a motion introduced yesterday is passed by council. CBC's Clara Pasica reports.
Fourplexes allowed by right. That's what a motion by Ward 2 Councillor Alvin Tedjo is aiming for.
These types of units can be incorporated within the existing fabric of the neighborhood. It's not such a scary thing.
Allowing triplexes was already mandated by the Ford government, part of a move to increase density to see Mississauga add 120,000 homes within the decade. Allowing fourplexes could densify neighborhoods more. The motion will be debated and voted on next week. Simon Tran says he'd love to move into a fourplex in Mississauga, but points out that this move is just the first step in helping young people like him.
And honestly, fourplexes, 4 units as of right in Mississauga really is the bare minimum that Mississauga City Council can do to address this housing crisis.
But not everyone is in favor of the idea. Some councillors voiced concerns about parking and said they think the motion is moving too fast, without enough time for residents to raise their concerns. Meanwhile, the federal government is all ears. Canada's Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities, Sean Fraser, says he's willing to approve the city's request for housing funding if it makes moves like this one. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Mississauga.
Ukrainian officials say 48 people have been killed in a Russian missile strike in the Kharkiv region. Search crews dig through the rubble of a store and cafe in the eastern Ukrainian village of Horoza. A 6-year-old boy is said to be among the dead. The strike comes as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Spain, continuing with his campaign for military support for the Ukrainian war effort. That's the CBC News from Toronto. I'm Nicole Martin. This is CBC Radio 1, 99.1. The weather forecast now for Barrie Huronia. A mix of sun and cloud today, chance of showers this afternoon, windy, a high of 24, feeling like 28 with the humidex. We'll see some showers beginning this evening, risk of a thunderstorm as well, a low of 13 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, showers ending in the morning, then a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 19. For Peterborough and the Kawarthas, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 25 today. We'll see some showers beginning near midnight, a low of 16 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, windy in the morning, showers ending in the afternoon, then mainly cloudy and a high of 19 degrees.
So my confession is, when the Hollywood writers' strike started, I quickly realized that more than any of the scripted shows, the thing I'd miss the most is late night television. I realized, though, I might be in the minority on this one. Today on the podcast, late night shows are finally back. Did anyone miss them? I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Well, it has been a while since we heard these voices.
In case you've forgotten, my name is Jimmy. I've been off the air for 5 months.
We're back, baby! We're back! Seriously, we were off the air for so long, The Bachelor went from this to this. I mean, what happened?
You know, we are more than just a group of people who work together here. To quote Vin Diesel in the Fast 5 movies,
look out! Look out, indeed. Hey, those were my friends. I don't know if you know my friends or not, but those were my friends. That's Jimmy, Stephen, John, and Seth. They're all back on the air this week, and as you heard, it's been, more than a 5-month hiatus to take stock of the week that has been on late night television and what's changed. And let me tell you, it sure seems like a lot has changed. We got NPR's TV critic and self-described late night nerd Eric Deggans. He's here with us, along with our regular Terry Hart. Eric, Terry, what's good? Welcome to Commotion. I'm so happy that you're here. Hello.
What up?
Let's do this. I'm so excited. Eric, I'm going to start with you because you seem so excited about this. What did you miss while these shows were off the air?
Well, what I love is how they contextualize all the news that happens, and something happens, and you think in the back of your mind, is this crazy? And then when like 3 of them crack jokes about it, you go, okay, I guess it was crazy. But really, I found that the late night shows helped me process news events, particularly when they're absurd or particularly bizarre or particularly notable. And so I did kind of miss that voice, although I will say the ratings came out for the first night, and the biggest late night shows all put together I think had 6 or 7 million people. Oof. Which is not a ton. Oof. And the lowest of the big 3 was Jimmy Fallon with less than 2 million viewers. So this is according to figures I got from ABC, because Jimmy Kimmel actually won that night. So it's a much smaller slice of the viewership pie than these shows have gotten before. They're becoming very boutique and niche, and I would not be surprised if a great many viewers did not miss them.
Well, we're going to hear from the winner of that night, Jimmy Kimmel, because one person who says he did not miss the late night shows is Donald Trump. He was up at 1 in the morning writing an angry post about Jimmy Kimmel that ended up turning into a bit.
Let's read through that again, because now that the strike is over, the talentless, low-rated creeps of late-night television are back. I knew there was a reason I didn't want to see it settled. True losers. I have to say, the way he worded that, it almost reads like a network promo.
Now that the strike is over,
it feels good to be back.
We are back.
The talentless, low-rated creeps of late-night television are back.
It's like all of Melania's birthday wishes came true at once.
I knew there was a reason I didn't want to see it settled. The writer's strike is over, and the true losers are back.
Bing, bing, bum, bum.
That's one take. Terry, watching a moment like that, how would you describe the power of these hosts at this particular moment in politics and culture?
Well, I think, Eric just summed up the fact that they have lost a lot of their power, but what they used to be were kind of the original hot takes, right? Like, we looked at them to be the curator of the day in news and to make sense of us, to make sense of it, and to allow us to go on to the next day and have something to talk about, maybe something that was funny, a unique take on what had happened. And that was power. But I mean, Eric talked about the numbers of them returning. Just the ad revenues in the past year are down more than 50% in 10 years and more than 60% since the peak of late night shows in 2016.
Right. Eric, how would you describe the power of these hosts? I mean, just broadly speaking, in terms of what we turn to them for.
Well, in particular, what we've turned to the mainline late night host for is a pushback against the Trump administration, pushback against the excesses of conservatives, pushback against the absurdity of our modern political system. That's what they've all kind of dove into to varying degrees. And, you know, you really saw it with Seth Meyers, who, you know, initially, and he admitted this during their Strike Force 5 podcast, when he first started hosting Late Night with Seth Meyers, he tried to get as far away from that image of being the guy on Weekend Update as possible. Right. But eventually he realized that's his lane. And so now, you know, when he came back on Monday, he did an hour-long version of his news parody, A Closer Look. And to me, it was the best comeback episode of the night, and just showed that that's the special moment of that show, is when he takes time and really digs into what's happened in the news of the day and lampoons it in ways that are surprising and also kind of illuminate things.
Yeah, I'm interested in this because I think you're both kind of describing a moral clarity. Like, that's the thing that we sort of turn to late night host for, is at least making jokes about the news, but also trying to say, hey, this is absurd and also not the way that the world should be. I think like that is part of the argument that they make. Eric, you just said Seth Meyers won the night for you in terms of the best quality of episodes. In fact, you ranked this week's shows. You gave Seth Meyers an A+. You gave Jimmy Fallon a C+, which is yikes. John Oliver got an A. Jimmy Kimmel got an A-. Stephen Colbert, my boy, somewhere in the middle of there with a B+. But despite the difference in quality, this range from an A+ to a C+, you said there was some kind of real sameness to the shows this week. Can you just give me some examples of that sameness?
Sure, absolutely. And I joked about it a little earlier. There were a lot of jokes about the same subject. I mean, everybody joked about Lauren Boebert and her, you know, moments during, you know, everybody knows
moment in the theater.
She was making out with some guy during a theater performance.
Everybody doing a little more than making out, but I appreciate you being tactful this morning.
It's morning. You know,
I love
maybe headed to school or work.
I get it.
I'm trying to be G-rated here.
It's very generous of you. Okay, continue.
So everybody jokes about Boebert. Everybody joked about the Golden Bachelor. Everybody joked about, of course, Trump's mini arrest. There was a lot of Trump in every show, and what struck me was that you know, John Oliver kind of covered that ground better the night before, even though all these guys had 5 months away. They, you know, I would say a good 20% of their monologue was all the same stuff, and that to me is just a sign that there needs to be more diversity in these hosts. They need to come from different sensibilities so that the humor is different, because that's one thing that always stood out about the Daily Show once Trevor Noah took it over, is that their sensibilities and the things they thought were interesting and the way they talked about the issues was always different. Same with Samantha Bee. The way she talked about issues was always different. She always found you know, surprising and different things to lampoon. There's a lot of news out there. Really, they should not be joking about the same 6 or 7 stories.
Eric, are you saying there's not enough diversity in late night television shows between a bunch of men who are a bunch of white men who are in their early 50s who come from the same position? Hey, some of them have facial hair and the other ones don't. Okay, Terry,
there's only two named Jimmy. There's only 2.
You're not wrong. Terry, we're talking with them as a block, and that's, you know, we kind of have always done so because it is like this collection of white men. But during the strike, it's kind of the way that it's seen most of the time. Thanks in part to this podcast that the 5 put together. Let's hear a clip from the last episode of this podcast called Strike Force 5. This is John Oliver.
Fantastic news for everyone who works in TV and films, and frankly, fatal news for this podcast. But listen, don't be sad that this podcast is over. Be angry that it ever had to happen in the first place.
For sure, a relief the strike is over. But do you think the strike and the podcast that it gave rise to shifted anything about how we perceive the influence of late night?
Well, I think we should perceive it that, you know, they all feel the precarity of their influence. I mean, these are 5 competitors who came together. It's kind of unheard of. It would be like your 5 lead actors of competing primetime shows making something separately. I mean, they all knew that they, had to still have their voices be heard, but not cross the picket line.
Defend the brand of late night almost.
Right. Like, you still need us. You really, really need us. It seemed like they really spoke volumes about knowing if they were not part of the zeitgeist for 5 months is how long it ended up being, but that it would be really bad, not just for their personal brand, but for this brand of late night. Like, their voices need to be out there. So, I think that we can all feel the precarity here. And I think that them coming together with this podcast I would like to be in on that group chat and see how many all caps and exclamation points were used around, like, guys, what are we going to do? We got to do something here, because that's kind of what this felt like to me.
Now I will say, I've met most of these guys, and I do think, that's a great point, but I do also think that they learned from the toxicity of the hosts that came before them, and in particular, I think they learned about how bad things got between David Letterman and Jay Leno and Conan O'Brien, and they have decided they are not replicating that, and that they're going to be better towards each other. And in fact, I found out, I did some Zoom interviews with staffs of late night when the lockdowns first happened in 2020, and they also talked a lot then when the lockdowns initially kind of halted their shows, and then they were trying to figure out how to come back. They all talked to each other and traded ideas and tips on how they might come back. So I think they have just kind of realized that they are stronger if they work together than if they are fiercely competitive.
That makes a lot of sense to me, because you know what? If I was one of 5 people who controlled a particular market, I'd be like, well, you guys want to do some coordination between all of us? And I don't even mean that in a nefarious way, but I just mean you'd want to sort of talk to your other colleagues in the same space. Eric, we don't have a lot of time left, but I can't let this conversation go without talking about the fact that the thing that wasn't talked about is this, meticulously reported expose that was published in Rolling Stone a few weeks ago. It was alleging that Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show is a really toxic place to work. Eric, you said you're betting that he's just kind of hoping enough time has passed that he can just pretend publicly that it didn't happen. Do you think it's going to just blow over?
Probably, unless they come up with a new expose. It certainly seems like he's just going along like nothing had happened, and I think part of that détente that they all have is that they're not going to bring up embarrassing stuff about any of the other hosts, so none of them would talk about it. I could just see David Letterman. If that happened during David Letterman's era, it would be all he could talk about. and so, and I also want to point out too that my concern about the diversity of late night, I joked about it, but it is serious. And we broke a story on NPR this morning that Roy Wood Jr. has decided that he is not returning to The Daily Show when it comes back to new episodes on October 16th. And Roy's been, one of the highest profile correspondents. He's African-American. He's concerned about the diversity of late night. That show has now lost 2 high-profile non-white, performers in Trevor Noah and Roy. And it just feels like the field is getting wider and wider as the genre contracts.
Terry, we got about a minute left here. What's going on behind the scenes? Whatever is happening there with this Jimmy Fallon story. There was actually no question that destination television, the idea that you just sit down at a specific time of day and be like, this is the time where I watch my shows, like that is in its dying days. So what is the solution for late night? And if it's on demand on TikTok or YouTube, will it even be what we consider to be late night anymore, do you think?
Well, here's what I know. People are still looking for personalities to give them takes on the day. That's what TikTok is, right? The hot takes, the story times. But how people are doing it on social media is much different than the, joke setup, bum that we're used to on late night. So the quote unquote authenticity of social media discourse is also not just the availability of it, but the actual style of talking about what's going on is very different than what we're seeing in late night. So I think the late night brand, which is, about 70 years old since late night television has been around, is in real jeopardy. And I mean, I don't know anybody who stays up late to watch these shows anymore, except for Eric, who I'm glad to know.
I'm glad he's doing it. Yeah,
I got a DVR.
Even that, right? Because if something's good, it's going to go viral the next day.
Sure.
And I mean, you're going to send it to me.
That's exactly right.
That's what's going to happen. So I don't know what happens to these guys, but Colbert and Fallon are both making over $15 million a year, and Kimmel and Fallon have contracts through 2025 and 2026. So we're going to have a couple more years to talk about what's going to happen to these guys.
I can't wait to do that. In the meantime, Terry, if you would start a TikTok telling me about, how to process the news, I would watch that instead. Terry, Eric, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks.
Talk soon. Eric Deggans is NPR's TV critic and the author of Race Baiter, How Media Wield Dangerous Words to Divide a Nation. And Terry Hart is an entertainment reporter and a regular right here on Commotion. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and this is Commotion. Listen, if I was the lead singer of a very famous Irish rock band about to headline the very first show of a very fancy $2 billion arena, I'd probably sound something like this.
What a fancy pad. Look at all this stuff. Elvis is definitely not left this building. Let's ride on tonight. The entrance to this cathedral is a password. Flirtation. Because later, we're going to get married, okay?
I love Bono because I don't even know what he's talking about half the time, but he's just so electric to listen to. That is Bono, that is U2, and the fancy pad that he's talking about has been all over my social media feed this week, and my jaw has been on the floor for every glimpse of it. U2 became the very first band to play The Sphere. That's what you call it. You got to use that voice when you say The Sphere. It is this new 18,000-seat orb-shaped venue in Vegas. It costs over $2 billion to build. It's like, I don't know, imagine the biggest IMAX movie theater screen and then blow it up to the size of the moon. We are talking 160,000 square feet of LED screens projecting over 300 feet above you and all around you. I wasn't there. I'm talking like I was there, but I wasn't there. But I'll tell you who was. Music journalist Stephen Hayden. He joins me now, presumably still mentally from the Sphere. Stephen, what's going on, dude?
Not much. And not to correct you right off the bat, but it's actually just known as Sphere. Like, you're not supposed to put a "the" in front of it, even though I did in my story because I feel like it makes it sound less Orwellian.
Yes.
If you call it the Sphere versus just Sphere. But yeah, it's technically it's just Sphere.
I think of Justin Timberlake in The Social Networks, like drop the just Sphere. You know, like that.
Exactly.
Okay, so it's been a few days since you were at Sphere. Are you going through Sphere withdrawal? What was that like? Tell me.
Well, it's funny because I saw Peter Gabriel a few days ago. It was my first post-Sphere experience. Sure. And Peter Gabriel, he's known for elaborate stage productions, and he had all these screens and everything. And it was like, oh yeah, like I'm not staring at a 300-foot screen. Like these screens in this arena actually look kind of small compared to what I just saw. I mean, it's a incredible venue. I mean, the screens are obviously very overwhelming. The sound is really great. The question is, like, how practical is this venue? I mean, U2 had 18 months to prepare a show for this space.
Right.
And of all the people that you would think of that could possibly go into the Sphere, that is a consideration. I don't see how you can just plug in like your normal arena show or stadium show. You really do have to design for that space.
Are you telling me you don't want to hear Big Time in Sphere right now? Are you telling me you don't want to hear Sledgehammer in Sphere?
That'd be amazing. That'd be amazing. But Peter is going to have to, go to the drawing board for a long time, I think, to conceptualize this space. I mean, just for a point of comparison, you were talking about an IMAX screen being blown up to the size of the moon. On the previous U2 tour, which was for the Joshua Tree, they're playing these stadiums, and there was a very impressive screen that they had behind them, just larger than life. And that screen was only like 10% the size of the screen in the Sphere. And that's a stadium-sized screen paid for by arguably the biggest rock band in the world. So
just take me there a little bit. Like, what you step in, you're like, I'm here to see U2 at Sphere. You walk in. What's your first impression? What do you experience when you walk in?
Well, I was in the 100 level section, which is pretty good seats. Yeah. And you get in there and you realize that being close to the stage actually isn't necessarily a good thing in this venue, because the venue is set up like a theater where all the seats are stacked up on top of each other, as opposed to an arena where you're sort of wrapped around the stage. So you're just looking at like a skyscraper, basically, a skyscraper sized backdrop. And once the screen actually gets going, I mean, you're looking up a lot.
Right.
So really, if you're paying for like the relatively cheap seats in the 300, 400 level, in a way you have the best seats in the house,
right?
At least in terms of appreciating the full Sphere-ness of Sphere.
the full Sphere-ness of Sphere. What was the most impressive moment for you in terms of like watching the show unfold? Because there's U2, there's one of the world's greatest rock bands of all time, but also there's this giant immersive experience happening around you at all times.
Well, I mean, the most dazzling parts of it were the photorealism images that were on the screen, like the moments where you feel like you're no longer in this giant bowling ball, but you're actually outside.
Right.
And one of the most shared clips of the show was during the encore when they play Where the Streets Have No Name, where it turns into this desert vista with like a sun in the sky, and there's this like
with a flag thing. Yeah, that's the one.
With
I think
a flag
I saw
thing made out of smoke, and it really does feel like you're looking at a desert. The way that it replicates natural light is very convincing, and it reminds me of something that I read going into the concert. It was, James Dolan is one of the people behind Sphere, and he's, of course, the comically terrible owner of the New York Knicks, among other things. But he talked about how he was inspired by this Ray Bradbury story called The Veldt from 1950, and it's this story about this futuristic nursery outfitted with video screens that transports children virtually to like these digital locales.
Right.
And you can really see that in this performance of Where the Streets Have No Name. Of course, James Dolan notes that in that story, the parents at the end are eaten by lions that come out of the screen.
I was going to say, Ray Bradbury famously not writing inspirational novels, right?
Exactly.
Not trying to be like, the world should look like this,
Right. He ignored the cautionary tale part of the story. It was just like, oh, these screens sound amazing. Let's just make screens that look like real life. What could possibly go wrong? So that's a very funny wrinkle, I think, to this whole story.
We got to talk about the fact that, like when U2 went on tour with the Zoo TV tour, it was groundbreaking then. It was all these crazy visuals, TV screens everywhere, social commentary, media critique. Do you think the Sphere show is as thought-provoking as like the Zoo TV tour?
I do not. And I think that is the weakness of the show. I mean, look, I had a good time there. It's a very, again, visually impressive show, but upon reflecting on it, if you're looking at it as an artistic endeavor and you're asking yourself, does this go to the next level where it actually says something about the world,
right,
which is something I think Zeus TV did. And when you look back on that tour, it seems more relevant than ever. I mean, they were talking about television then, but really what they were commenting on feels more relevant to where we are now in terms of the internet and social media and this media saturation that we're all involved in, and how it disconnects us in some way from like our humanity. I mean, that was the point of that tour.
Right.
This tour, this residency is just about spectacle. It's about, isn't this a cool room? You know, look at all these amazing things that we can do. And I think in that respect, the show, it just doesn't have the depth of what they did before. And I think it's going to be interesting with other artists playing this room, like what they choose to do with it.
Steven, we got to leave it there. I'm going to go try to imagine who the other artists who can play this room. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your time, dude. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Stephen Hyden is a culture critic at Uprocks and co-host of the IndieCast podcast. U2's residency at the Sphere runs till December 16th on select dates. My name is Alamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to see you tomorrow.
From CBC Toronto, mostly cloudy, 20 degrees. I'm Nicole Martin. Here are your top stories. The federal government is expected to offer an update today on its pledge to stabilize grocery prices. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland and Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne met with CEOs of the country's biggest grocers last month and gave them until Thanksgiving to come up with a plan to make food more affordable. And over 100 asylum seekers in Toronto are looking for immediate shelter. Dozens had to leave a church in North York last night. The landlord says he needs the space back for upcoming events. Others have been sleeping on the streets in downtown Toronto for a week. The Rwandan Canadian Healing Centre, a not-for-profit organization providing support to trauma victims, has been calling on all levels of government since this summer to step up to help newcomers to Canada. The centre says the three levels of government need to stop pointing fingers at each other and come up with solutions before the winter. More news ahead at the top of the hour on CBC Radio 1. The weather forecast now for Barrie Huronia. A mix of sun and cloud today, chance of showers this afternoon. Windy, a high of 24, feeling like 28 with the humidex. We'll see some showers beginning this evening, risk of a thunderstorm as well, a low of 13 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, showers ending in the morning, then a mix of sun and cloud and a high of 19. For Peterborough and the Kawarthas, a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 25 today. We'll see some showers beginning near midnight, a low of 16 degrees overnight. Tomorrow, windy in the morning, showers ending in the afternoon, then mainly cloudy and a high of 19 degrees.
Award shows in the world. One of the most amusing is the Golden Raspberry Awards. Known to most as the Razzies, they were created by advertising copywriter John Wilson and friend Mo Murphy. The Razzies are a celebration of the worst films of the year. It all started in 1980 when Wilson hosted a potluck Oscar party for friends. After the award ceremony ended, it was still early in Los Angeles. So Wilson set up a cardboard podium in his living room, put a foam ball on the end of a broom for a microphone, and asked his guests to suggest random awards. The funniest ones were for the year's most terrible movies. The next year, Wilson and Murphy issued a press release listing the worst movies of the year, and it was picked up by a few newspapers. By the fourth year, CNN and 3 of the major wire services were covering the amateur award ceremony. The Razzies are now voted on by 750 international members comprising of film critics, members of the film industry, and frequent filmgoers. There are even a few celebrities who vote, but their names are kept secret. Wilson also figured something else out. He couldn't compete with the Oscars on Oscar night, but when he released their list the night before the awards, the worldwide press, who were all in town looking for something to do, would cover it. The Razzies ceremony is now held in a 300-seat theater in Los Angeles. The statuette is a golf ball-sized raspberry spray-painted gold. Street value, $4.97. In 2005, Halle Berry, who had won an Oscar 3 years earlier, was given a Razzie for Worst Performance in the film Catwoman. Much to the surprise of the Razzies crowd, Berry showed up to accept the Razzie in person and did a parody of her Oscar speech with Oscar in hand. The crowd loved her. Sandra Bullock showed up to collect her Razzie for Worst Performance in the movie All About Steve. She even brought gifts for everyone in the audience.
We brought everyone in the audience tonight a DVD of All About Steve.
The next night, Bullock won an Oscar for The Blind Side. And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson took his Razzie in stride, too.
I'm also excited because I was just informed that I, too, am bringing home the gold tonight. No, not an Oscar, maybe one day, but a Razzie. Razzie are the annual awards given out to Hollywood's worst movies, and I have officially won one for Baywatch.
Of course, not all actors have a sense of humor. Sylvester Stallone holds the record for being nominated for 30 Razzies and winning 10. He reportedly left a voicemail for Wilson and Murphy asking why they were picking on him. There is also the Barry L. Bumstead Award. This special Razzie is given to the movie that has underperformed to a historic degree. Think of it as the polar opposite of the Cecil B. DeMille Award. When I asked Mo Murphy where the formal-sounding name Barry L. Bumstead came from, she said it just came to her in a dream. In 2016, the Barry L. Bumstead Award was given to the film United Passions, starring Sam Neill. It had the distinction of having a $30 million budget and a total of $918 in ticket sales. The Razzies only focus on big-budget, big-name movies because they have no excuse for being as bad as they are. As John Wilson says, the Razzies aren't cruel. They exist to just ask, why? But sometimes there is an unexpected upside to winning a Razzie. The universally panned movie Showgirls was re-released by the studio, who promoted it on posters as, quote, winner of an unprecedented 7 Razzies, exclamation mark. And one of the writers of Catwoman said the Razzies actually boosted its DVD sales. Good or bad, award shows mean business. In the world of marketing, award shows generate business. From the Oscars to the Grammys to the Tonys, award shows not only celebrate creativity, they are giant commercials. Winning an Academy Award can add millions of dollars to the bottom line. A Grammy win can make a career, and a Tony can actually save a play from closing overnight. Even automotive trophies sell a lot of cars, because there's no business like awards business.
You're under the influence.
Power to the people. Power to the people.
When I was one of the lead ad writers on the Nissan account back in the late 80s, I remember that we started getting unusual assignments. We were asked to write ads that highlighted certain awards Nissan was receiving. These citations had a grand-sounding name, yet I had never heard of them before, even though I had been writing automotive ads for brands like BMW and Volkswagen for years. They were called the J.D. Power Awards. J.D. Power & Associates was a California-based market research firm that ranked the quality of automobiles. These rankings were determined by large surveys filled out by the actual owners of the vehicles, not by the car industry itself, much to Detroit's dismay. James David Power earned his MBA from Wharton in the late 1950s. Dave, as he preferred to be called, went to work in the finance department of the Ford Motor Company. After a few years, he moved on to the advertising department. While in advertising, he quickly realized advertising claims could be much more persuasive if backed with facts and data that came from actual car owners, instead of the forest of exclamation marks that came from the advertising department. But Dave also realized auto manufacturers weren't asking their customers the right questions, if they asked at all. So on April Fool's Day in 1968, Dave Power and his wife Julie started a market research firm at their kitchen table. They called it J.D. Power and Associates. Within a year, J.D. Power had convinced Toyota to buy its market research. In the 70s, the Wall Street Journal published a big story on Mazda based on data from one of the first J.D. Power surveys. That got a lot of attention. Then, in 1979, Chrysler ran a 2-page ad in Businessweek magazine stating it was the highest-ranking domestic automaker, according to J.D. Power. The ad infuriated Chrysler's competitors. After the ad ran, a Ford executive cornered Dave Power and told him that if he continued to allow the Italian to use his data, he'd never do business with Ford again. The Italian the Ford executive was referring to was Chrysler President Lee Iacocca. Then, in 1981, J.D. Power began conducting its 2 cornerstone surveys, the Initial Quality Study and the Vehicle Dependability Study. The Initial Quality Study asked car owners what problems they've experienced in the first 90 days of ownership. The second survey asked car owners what problems they've had after they've owned the cars for 3 years. On January 2nd, 1984, Subaru became the first automaker to advertise its J.D. Power rankings in a Super Bowl commercial. That not only boosted Subaru sales enormously, it made J.D. Power and Associates a brand in the eyes of the public. The very name J.D. Power was powerful and memorable. It almost felt invented. Soon, all major car companies, Ford included, paid very close attention to J.D. Power. In 1989, J.D. Power began to hand out trophies to the very best-in-class vehicles, and those awards became highly coveted by automakers. First, they had a big impact on the choices car buyers made. Second, the rankings forced car manufacturers to pay more attention to quality. And lastly, the awards became so desirable to car makers, many employees had part of their compensation tied to winning. Eventually, the phrase, ranked in customer satisfaction by J.D. Power, became one of the most important advertising tools in the auto industry. As you no doubt have seen in the heavily advertised Chevy commercials touting real people, not actors.
So many. Yeah, Chevy's earned more 2016 J.D. Power awards for initial quality and dependability than any other brand.
Thanks for blowing our minds.
J.D. Power has strict guidelines for companies when quoting its awards and insists on vetting every claim before it can be used in ads. The firm makes its money by licensing its name each time a company wants to mention it in advertising, and by selling its research findings to those companies. To date, more than 350,000 television commercials and over 2 billion print ads have mentioned the J.D. Power Awards, turning the company into a household name. The idea of an independent research company representing the voice of the customer was a very lucrative marketing idea. Dave Power sold his company to McGraw-Hill in 2005 for around $400 million. 11 years later, McGraw-Hill sold J.D. Power for $1.1 billion, which just might rank it as one of the best performing investments in the research industry. several high-profile award shows. Maybe the most prestigious is the Grammys. The show began in 1959 as the Gramophone Awards, which was eventually shortened to the Grammys. The first ceremony was held at the Beverly Hilton Hotel in Beverly Hills. 28 awards were given out that night. Interesting to note, the Grammys began just as rock and roll was exploding. Elvis, Little Richard, and Chuck Berry were selling the most records, but the founders of the new National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences were older and feared this new rock music would drown out quality music. So, when the first nominations were announced, rock was nowhere to be found. Frank Sinatra, on the other hand, had 12 nominations, but was beat out for Record of the Year by someone named Domenico Modugno. Other winners included Henry Mancini, Perry Como, and the Kingston Trio. The first rock award didn't happen until 1961, when Chubby Checker won for Let's Twist Again. In 1962, the best rock and roll recording went to this ditty. That's a rockin' tune. By 1964, the Grammys were begrudgingly becoming a little more hip. Best New Artist went to a group from Liverpool you might have heard of. In 1967, the Grammys threw that band a bigger bone, with Album of the Year going to Sgt. Pepper. Today, the voting members of the Recording Academy are made up of recording artists, music engineers, producers, and songwriters. And yes, you can vote for yourself. Like the J.D. Power Awards, the Grammys is a huge marketing vehicle. Arguably, no other award show has a more immediate benefit to its industry's bottom line than the Grammys, because music can be purchased instantly. It's called the Grammy Bump. At the 2019 Grammys, songs performed on the show collectively tallied a 480% increase in digital download sales. According to The Hollywood Reporter, sales of Casey Musgrave's song Rainbow shot up 9,430%. Brandi Carlile's The Joke spiked by 2,771%. Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper's Shallow surged 229% the very next day. Grammy wins can make a career. Back in 1990, Warner Brothers had dropped Bonnie Raitt from its label, and her career was in decline. Then, she won Album of the Year for Nick of Time. That win sent the record to #1, which was not only her first #1, but her first top 20 album. Sales doubled, then the album went gold, then platinum, then double platinum 2 months later, eventually selling 5 million copies. That Grammy win transformed Raitt from a veteran singer-guitarist into a perennial radio presence. In 2012,